Hello, friends, and welcome back. It is episode 3 of the Oscars Project, and we are venturing into 1962 for Lawrence of Arabia. I am joined with Jared and Chris. Jared, will you give us a quick introduction, please?
Sure. Jared, you can find me on the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can find me here on the Page Chewing forums, where we have several podcasts going that you can join us for as well.
Just a couple.
Yeah.
And Chris?
Yeah, my name's Chris Mohan. Voice is a bit rough due to illness, but maybe we will not get to talk as long as the film, quite possibly. But a lot to say about that. But Lawrence of Arabia. I nearly forgot what bloody movie it was.
Yeah, even on our most talkative days, I don't know if we can do 3.5 hours.
No,
That's quite a long one.
Indeed.
So that's my first time watching Lawrence of Arabia. Jared, you said you've seen it before?
Yeah, I saw it about a quarter century ago, and I just finished the first watching the other day. That's how long it took, and then I watched it again. No, but I didn't remember much. It was a long time ago, and I did remember it was pretty long. But I did also remember that it was quite beautiful. It's a beautiful film. Cinematography-wise, the scenery is just unbelievable. And I think I saw the restored version this time around, because I think it was restored in like 2008 or something like that. Not that I would really notice the difference, or remember the difference, I should say. I might notice it if it was side by side today, but I wouldn't really remember the difference. I saw it on DVD the first time, and it's quite the feat, actually. This film, it's quite the feat to finish it. It is long. You got to be prepared going in.
For sure.
Chris, is this your first time, or have you seen it before?
So it's my first full time watching it. It is a kind of movie that has always been on in chunks. You watch about it in an hour chunk and you kind of go, okay, I know what's happened. But this is my first time sitting start to finish and watching it. I did it all in one go.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Which was interesting, I think, actually, to look at it. I did pause for toilet breaks, now to be fair, and to refill my glass, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't totally like some sort of endurance test, but yeah.
I was going to say,
first
not
time,
a pause? Yeah.
No, but definitely a couple of pauses in the middle. Like, had to eat things, It is that long. I can't imagine actually doing it in like a cinema with just
in a cinema, yeah.
A 15-minute intermission in the middle like that. That would be different, I think.
They used to have like intermissions and stuff in theaters back in the day. I wonder if they definitely inserted one into this one. Yeah.
There was a film this year that put one in. Was it Megalopolis or something that had an intermission in it this year, like almost like a throwback to that. But like certain films, like it's Mad World has an intermission. Seven Samurai has an intermission. So around this time, around the 60s, it was definitely a common thing. I suppose a day out at the cinema was much more of an event, maybe in those days. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, it's funny because like watching this film, I was like, because when there was, drama and dialogue, it was very entertaining, and it was like, oh, cool, there was some good lines and stuff, and you're interested in the character of Lawrence of Arabia, and what and how different he was from everybody else around him, and then there was all this scenery and all this, long treks and long scenery and all this wonderful shots and all that stuff, and I just felt like I was like looking through a National Geographic and looking at the pretty pictures, and I was like, all right, that's great, pretty pictures. Can we get back to the story? It's definitely it's different kind of movie than what we're used to nowadays.
Funny, I would say sort of the opposite, Jared, in some ways,
Oh,
because I mean, I think it's a funny character to make a 4-hour film about, if you know what I mean, because I would say there's only really an hour of interest in it in some ways, so you sort of have to make peace with the fact that it's so beautiful. Like, the scenery is what you're going for. It is almost like you're going to see a National Geographic, which I'm sure actually in those days, I was trying to think of anything of this scale. Obviously there were epics made beforehand, but I can't think of too many that were shot on location in quite the way that this was. At that time it was very obvious Oscar bait in some ways, in terms of like, how can we make sure that we win the Best Picture Oscar? Let's do something like this. And again, your point about the fact that it's a restored version, and I watched it in 4K and all of those kind of things, it is something else to look at, like, at all times, I think, pretty much, from start to finish, and especially in those kind of, what would be quite, I don't know, they're like linking pieces, but to kind of show the vast distances that they're covering, in terms of like a feat and the amount of, how extraordinary it was and all that kind of stuff. I was just like, I'm getting much more joy out of that than necessarily I am from watching this character and some of the, as brilliant as Alec Guinness and Anthony Quinn are, some of the, what is pretty much blackface that's going on in the film as well, that nobody has ever mentioned as a thing. Like, as brilliant as those two actors are, it's a bit weird to look at.
Yeah, they would definitely fill-ins for white casting or what have you, but I know. I like Alec Guinness. He's cool.
Brilliant. He's great in it. Yeah, as Anthony Quinn's amazing as well. So, but we had that. We talked about that last time with West Side Story. West Side Story, yeah.
So it's it was the thing back then, and it's like it's too bad too. But and it's kind of funny how the film starts off with him on a motorcycle there, and you see all these signs, these street signs, danger ahead, and it kind of like telling you that the movie's gonna be danger ahead, and then you go from this accident straight to cut to a tombstone, and it just makes you wonder right away, who is this guy? That we had to witness his accident and then see his tombstone. So there's this big question of who he was. And that's kind of what everybody's asking throughout the whole film, is who is this guy? And he's kind of discovering that himself, of who he is and what he wants to be. And that's kind of like just a running theme that's going throughout the whole film.
Yeah, he evolves and changes quite a bit throughout. I mean, he has the rise and fall, but I couldn't help but laugh in the beginning with the motorcycle scene with him, the goggles hanging on the little tiny tree branch, and that was kind of funny. But yeah, I go back and forth on whether the choice to kill him off so early and then we go back in time, but it is a pretty mundane way to die after all that he's been through, to die on a motorcycle with some kids that are in the street. It's just kind of, I guess that's just the way life goes sometimes, right? You survive this incredible journey and then you die on a motorcycle somewhere because some kids on the wrong side of the road. So
well, you don't get that in the desert. It's not quite the same in the desert. It's all that space. But again, that thing that starts with the almost the eulogizing of him, basically saying, "Did you know him?" And then, no, never met him, but he was a great man, and it's almost a little nod to celebrity culture or something, people that are famed and have been written about and that people say are great, but actually nobody knows whether they're great, they don't have a personal relationship with them. And it's sort of, the film then becomes an exploration of whether he was great, but also his own discovery as to who he was as a man, and his own hubris and all of the things that went with it.
I like the guy who's like, yeah, he was, kind of talking crap about him, and then the other guy walks up like, hey, how dare you say that about him? And they go, did you know him? He's like, well, no, but I shook his hand once and I met him once.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of true for anyone, right? Like, no one is just one thing. Everyone has different sides and has positives and negatives, and you can't really describe anyone in a few words.
That's right. But it also becomes full circle at the end, doesn't it? With the guy who shakes his hand at the end. It might even be the same guy at the start, who actually hits him a few minutes beforehand and calls him a wog, because he didn't recognise him and that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, again, it's sort of bookended by those kind of those conversations and those things.
Yeah, and when he says he wants to go to the desert, he wants to go and take this mission on, and he says it, he thinks it's going to be fun, and the guy's like, you have a funny sense of fun, So right away we're treated to how odd this guy is compared to the rest of his contemporaries, but we're also shown just how odd he is compared to the people he's getting involved with, all the Arab tribes and stuff, and he continually stands out wherever he is as just somebody who's not melding with the crowd, and he's not a he's not a sheep, he's not a follower, and he's not somebody who just blends in. It's shown continually out the film. He stands out no matter where he is, and that was just start right off the bat with that. You have a funny sense of fun, and just how he even when he was talking to his superiors, his officers, and how they didn't really know how to deal with him that well. It was it was just interesting to see that right off the bat.
It was, you get, he's an idealist, and he's also a little bit naive. He seems a little bit naive and unprepared for what's ahead of him, because he goes from drawing maps to being in the map and being part of the world instead of a spectator. He's an active participant in big ways, but it's a long journey, but there's a ton of symbolism in all the backgrounds. So as long as it is, you could tell they took a lot of time having certain items and backgrounds and certain paintings and statues and all sorts of things to convey certain things during the film. So they did put a lot of thought into it, but it is very long.
Yeah.
And then so he comes upon this well that he has. What was it? His guide was bringing him to this well, and the other tribesmen who we know turns out to be Ali, Sheriff Ali, comes up and he shoots the other guy, and I was like, "Oops! Oh well, Tafas is dead," but and that's where we get the initial explanation of how these different tribes work and their specific rules about their territory and how they react to one another. And even the guide knew this isn't our well, so we got to be careful. And then of course it comes to play out that the Sheriff Ali kills him, and but even then Lawrence refuses helps from him initially with, like you said, Steve, that kind of naive ideology that he has going into this is shown.
And really giving the guy the pistol was also not the best choice, because it may have gotten him killed. If he didn't have the pistol, would he have been shot and killed? I don't know. It doesn't seem like he was really going to kill them until he went for the gun, and then he shot and killed him. So that was another kind of completely clueless on how this world works.
Yeah,
Right.
very much the fish out of water kind of scenario where I mean, it sort of feels like it's setting up the fact that he's going to have to adapt quickly if he's going to survive in this world. You know, if that's what his intention is, but also I think it gives him a false sense of what his understanding of what this world is. You know, in some ways he kind of identifies some very top level things, but then obviously comes later on to realize that there's certain things that he can't cut through. There's certain things that he cannot be. He can never be an Arab. He can't do any of those things. But I think at this stage, when he's starting the early parts of the film, I think he thinks that he can, or that he is. You know, and his identity is malleable.
Right. Yeah, and it's like the Prince Faisal, with Sir Alec Guinness, tells him right off the bat, because he's asking the Prince, "What do you need? You know, what do you need?" And the Prince tells him right off the bat, "We need what no man can provide."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, yeah, but he's got that idealism in his head saying, "I can do this," you know that, and he strives his hardest to provide what nobody else can provide.
Yeah.
It's not an easy transition either at the very beginning, of his journey to, because he goes back, he saves the guy who was fallen behind.
Yeah.
Saves
Yes.
him, and then it turns out that later he had committed to killing when the two other men get in an argument and one of them gets killed. The one who killed the other guy, then he commits. It's the same person he went back to save, which was a kind of a nice twist.
Yeah.
A kick in the gut for him.
Yeah.
You know? And it was interesting because that moment where he had to kill the guy he saved, the life he basically owned by saving him, he felt the responsibility to end. You saw that change coming over him, that change where he's starting to believe some of this stuff about himself, about
Sure.
nothing is written and I can accomplish things. I can even do this horrible deed that needs to be done in order to accomplish these goals. And we start to see that this is actually going to get worse. This caught up in his own arrogance kind of thing, and it's only going to grow from this point.
It was not a pretty, well, no execution is pretty, of course. It was not a fast execution. It was not a clean execution. It was messy and
Yeah.
But he also has to face the fact that he doesn't like murder, if you know what I mean. He can't be the person that either does it or is close to the people that do it, or he has a hand in. And sometimes you see this repeatedly throughout the story then, of him actually, when he has to take affirmative action like that, even though he's trying to set an example, he's trying to do it right, his character means that he never makes peace with that. It sort of breaks him bit by bit as it goes, as each event happens.
yeah.
Yeah, because there was quite a few points where he, he's worried about loving the killing too much.
Yeah.
He's worried about that, and he's got that mad look in his eyes. Peter O'Toole, right? That's
Yes.
yeah, the actor.
Yeah.
And he says that he says, he questions whether he likes the killing too much, and he tells the guy, "Do I like this?" And so that that exploration of himself once again is still ongoing the whole time. And it's a very interesting character.
Yeah.
You know? nothing is written.
That's what's written. But isn't it funny how the more that he starts to doubt himself, the less it seems to matter the other people that follow him, if you know what I mean. You know, they don't see. I think the audience sees. I think he sees it that he's almost a false prophet of his own making, and that other people never expected that of him. Anyway, they never seen him at quite the level that he thought. I think it's a bit of a strange place he finds himself in. That he thought he was godlike, and that he thought he was infallible. It turns out he was fallible, but other people, it didn't really seem to matter. Like Ali, etc., still kind of rallied around him. Still kind of asked, did whatever he thought. His kind of major deeds is going back for the guy to save him, even though he had to shoot in the end. Lawrence thinks it was fallacy, but actually in doing so, he created, something else for himself there that was tangible. Things that changed for him because he went back and did it and survived it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely gave him that aura, that he needed to win people over. Because if he didn't do that, he would just be another guy on this trip.
That's right.
Which he started out that way because he, like when they were going across that desert, and they constantly showed the desert, and they constantly showed the pictures of the desert and how brutal it was, and the sun and all that stuff. And like he's on the camel, and he's like drifting. He's like starting to nod off and drift and stuff like that. And so was I at the time, actually. But but at that point, he was still one of the guys. He was still fallible and somebody who could fall prey to that stuff. And then Ali kind of smacks him, and he vows not to drift again and what have you. But then when he goes beyond what they ask of him is when they start to see him as something a little more.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And some questions were brought up during those periods when he started first going with the tribes, like questions of loyalty and where does his loyalty lie when he's trying to do this mission for the British, but he's also quite not on board with the British like moving in and taking over. He's saying, he's putting out all this stuff that he wants to do it for the Arabs and make an Arab nation out of all of them, all of the tribes. And so these questions of loyalty keep coming up, not just his own loyalty, but the loyalty of all the other people he's trying to work with and trying to get to work together for a single common goal, and the loyalty to the goal itself,
Yeah, there's many stories like this, but we've talked about this before about cultures and different, how one culture sees another culture as less than, or tries to morph them into what they deem as normal or what they think they should live like. So I like that. I like that kind of angle that the movie took of coming in and trying to warp other countries, other cultures to what they think they should be like, or kind of just making decisions for them because they think that they know better what's better for them than they do themselves. So it's just, I mean, there's many stories like that throughout history, but it's always interesting.
Yeah. And interestingly for Lawrence, of course, he's seen as an other within the English establishment as well. He's not from his father, doesn't know who his father is, essentially. He, even though he is sort of like in that upper class, born to that kind of stock, if you know what I mean. He's seen as the outside. They didn't know where to put him. They didn't know where he fit within the war, etc. And so he goes out there, and he probably goes out with the idea that he's an outsider in his own land, and he's trying to fit in somewhere else. And he's not a stupid man by any means, because he does see the road to success, if you know what I mean. Knows that actually unity and uniting the Arab tribes actually can only bring good things for them, long term. Like the fact that when he runs into Anthony Quinn's character and he says, "I get paid 100 guineas every month," and he's like, "And what? What's 100 golden guineas? You know that's nothing. You know you're not thinking of this in terms of long term strategy or long term goals, etc." Which is how he gets, kind of notoriety and success at that stage, by actually showing that actually if they do group together in some way, they can achieve so much more as a state, but that ultimately a lot of that still falls apart in the end because of just the machinations of the way the world works. The English and the French essentially control the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So along with that idea comes the another, there's a lot of questions brought up there in this film. It's like what is service, and who does he serving, that goes along with the loyalty question. And so when these tribes are trying to serve only their own needs, they're kind of running in, like you said, they're running in quicksand. 100 guineas, and that, of course, that literal quicksand comes up later in the film. But the but they were literally like that's what's happening with these tribes. They're not getting anywhere. They're not going anywhere because they're only self-serving and they're only serving themselves. And so he's trying to create a service to a greater idea and a greater thing, which is a very British Empire kind of idea. But where else can the Arab tribes go? Because they're already under the Turks, and they're trying to break free of that, and they can't do that without that greater idea of service to a greater whole, even though that's a Western concept. So it's a very tricky and not easily answerable questions for the film to tackle.
Yeah, and also it struck me towards the beginning when the village or the group is getting the air bombed and the planes are flying over and dropping bombs, and he mentions, my people have never seen weapons like this, modern weapons like this before, because they're all frightened. And there's that evolution, that the evolution through warfare, that you realize that they're outgunned and outmatched as far as weaponry goes. But it changes later. But
yeah. Yeah, and the gold thing that comes up again, and you start to say, well, what is gold? It's just another means to an end. It's not, originally for some of the tribes it was wow, we got gold, we're on top of the hill, and then it turns out, well, it's just another means, it's just another thing. And Lawrence is like just lying to them, saying, yeah, you can have all the gold you want, that means nothing to me.
That idea that gold or money or any of that kind of stuff is just a form of control for other people on you. The fact that you need it, and it's not actually freedom. It can't actually buy you the thing that you want. It can get you nice food, can get you better clothes, all of that kind of stuff, but it's not actually, achieving the aims that you want. They're already at the start of the film kind of talking about what is the best form of compromise that we can have out of this entire situation. Like Prince Faisal, that's sort of where he's at the start, and even by the end of the film, for everything that's happened, it's what form of compromise can we have at the end, so it is that idea of what anybody wants, and kind of also the state of the world at the time, around who controlled the power, biggest armies, all of that kind of stuff, was really what made the world go round.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's when because he had those two kids basically serving him, and when it was right after he's promising all this gold and talking about gold, that he ends up losing this kid in quicksand. And that was just like kind of like what does all this gold mean when you lose somebody like that? It means absolutely nothing. And so he had to, it was kind of like a slap in the face about with his goals, and he loses this kid in quicksand, which is just so representative of what can happen when things fall apart, and when the 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 false ideals of gold and being power and stuff like that don't really work. And so it's just interesting.
I even think before that, with the two boys, the fact when they approach them, though, they follow them along, and they're being introduced, and everybody else is telling Lawrence that they're worthless, they don't belong to anybody, that they're orphans, a lot the other ones. But as soon as he employs them and gives them a shilling each for thing, it legitimizes them. The money and the salary legitimizes them within the group, because instantly everybody in the group is like, that's a great thing to do, even though like literally 10 seconds earlier they were going, they're no good, you gotta get rid of them.
Yeah.
All of that kind of stuff. As soon as he pays them and gives them a salary, they become worth and they become useful. And again, gives you an idea of how currency and payment and all of that kind of stuff can really matter.
Yeah. One of the scenes I really loved was when I think they're attacking a train, and they got the guns and they're shooting the guns, and then up comes the photographer shooting pictures while they're shooting with guns. And I was just like, that's so good. That's such a great symbol of another type of shooting, and another type of death, if you think about it. Taking these pictures, wartime photographer taking these pictures, showing them to the public, and it's just a completely different kind of showing the death of something. And and I just really love that symbolism of him shooting pictures at the
Yeah.
at those times, and how one of the tribesmen refused to be shot, so to speak. And really great use of that whole metaphor there.
Great character. Yeah, and also a different type of warfare as well, the media warfare, and how you can inspire people to invest in a war or do otherwise. You give them the hero and you paint the picture and all of that kind of stuff. Like kind of very clever use of the changing world, so to speak. It wasn't just tanks and guns and money, it was also information and media.
Yeah, that's right. And he used that the use of the photographs, and this guy wanted to make him into a hero that people were looking for. And because the media at the time, of course, everybody's looking for a hero to glam onto in order to have a good picture of the war, a good reason for people to be there, to fighting for these things, and why it's all going on. People want a why. They want something, a hero to look at, to see that their country's doing the right thing. And this guy, as a photographer, was glamming onto that. But it also, I think, got to Lawrence's head as well.
Oh yeah.
It built up his arrogance. It built up his sense of he's comparing himself to Moses, and he's getting compared. He's being called a prophet here and there, and the arrogance is just growing and growing and growing, until finally he gets that humbling experience, where it wasn't just the torture with the whip that was humbling. It was also the fact that the Turks didn't even take note of who he was when they did it. That was like more of the humbling aspect. He was just another guy, just somebody else that they tortured for whatever reason it was, and then they just got rid of him, threw him out like trash. And that was the true humbling of him right at that point.
The photographer and the whole, he almost made him into celebrity, and kind of like you said, it inflated his ego and gave him a greater sense of worth and invincibility, that he could not be hurt, and he started to believe what people were saying about him. But I think that's kind of true with any war propaganda or any kind of propaganda at all. They want to make someone out to seem like people can get behind and root for, and someone that's bigger than life and is more powerful and can't be stopped. But yeah, he definitely just started to believe it and drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Captain America. Yeah, indeed. It's pretty much it. Although, again, it's referred to later on when Allenby, who is basically running the war, basically says, who the hell's going to remember me? Nobody's going to remember me, even though I was the guy responsible for it all and for everything that happened. Like, I'm a nobody. And at the start, it really irks him. But by the end, he's sort of embraced that's what it was. And, it's just part of the story.
Yeah. And I like how he could, he was like worried, like Lawrence was worried about the promises to the Arab people, and his Allenby, what was his name, his commander, that was like, well, I'm not a politician, I don't have to worry about that. I'm just gonna send you in to do your job. So yeah, you're right, he was taken aback at first, but he seemed to like put two and two together and say, yeah, whatever, I'm just a general.
Just a tool. Yeah, but he used him as a tool then, and he could be using to play both sides. And as it turned out, Prince Faisal kind of seen that as well at the end, basically going, he was a tool to Prince Faisal as well. Ultimately his worth or his outcomes were only moved the needle ever so much. Changed the narrative somewhere in the middle, but the outcome was sort of predefined at the start.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where so after the torture is kind of where the downside of his arc begins, right? Because he starts to his descent begins from there, and he becomes a different person entirely after that realization that he can't just become he's confined to his skin, and he can't just morph and evolve into anything he wants. So there's a lot of, but there's another film that we talked about recently, Chris, about your identity and what who you are and what you can be and what you can become. And he struggled with that, I think, in that aspect.
Yeah, he was the poor devil riding the whirlwind.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely parallels between not just that film we watched, but books that we're discussing, all of that kind of stuff. They're all kind of about these. This is a very male-dominated film. You know what I mean? There's not really female characters in it. It's very much a male world from start to finish, which for a 4-hour movie again is utterly mind-blowing in its own right. But it is a lot about ego, and it is about masculinity, and it is about war, and it's about exerting power and all of those things. Very male-dominated spaces. And for him to be the hero, he's not a very manly man. He's not a very forthright kind of domineering man. He's actually quite soft. He's got kind of the blonde hair and the kind of piercing eyes and kind of very soft demeanour, and does it through understanding. So I think when I say this is an odd film, it's an odd film in so much that he became the subject of a 4-hour movie. You know what I mean? That this kind of character in a world where he's surrounded by very, people that are trying to exert themselves all around them.
Yeah, the long shots when I first started, I thought it was 2.5 hours. Then I realized we were 2 hours in, and there was no way it was going to wrap up anytime soon. So I was a little bit surprised. But all the long shots of the desert, and the desert is almost like a furnace. Well, because of the temperature, but it's almost I think they mentioned in the beginning that it'll chew you up, like chew you up and spit you out, and that becomes a character in and of itself. It becomes a big part of the film, and kind of the match at the beginning that he puts out with his fingers, and he just separate yourself from the pain and your body, separate your mind and body, and that's put to the test several times. But yeah, I think that the desert, it becomes this, especially in the second half, becomes this oppressive kind of feeling to it. It's almost like trying to kill him or everyone, really.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely the man versus environment conflict going on for a big chunk of the film.
Yeah. And you get the sense, like, for the first hour, 2 hours, as you say, Steve, there's a sense of wonder at it. Everything's very expansive and wide, and it's beautiful. And I couldn't help but think about things like its influence on things like Star Wars, on the fact that it's sort of used an awful lot of the same kind of awe and wonder shots of the wideness of the desert, but as the film goes on, it becomes much more narrow. You're looking for the things in the desert. You're not seeing the whole expanse anymore. You're looking for the train that's going along. The fact that they even see the boat, when they get to the canal afterwards. I mean, these events that stand up at kind of at the end, they're tethered, they don't know where they are, and then they see a boat, and it's, the wee tiny small watering holes that there are the events. Everything else is just an expanse that will set it to kill you, whether it's quicksand or just the oppressive heat or otherwise.
Yeah, and I love that view of how they shot them taking the city when they came into the city, with all the people running and then them coming in with all the horses and camels and stuff like that. It was a spectacular piece of cinematography at that point, and just choreography of all that going on when they're coming into the city like that. But it really was something else to see that, in the contrast of going from the desert suddenly into this city and then seeing an ocean beyond it, was like, what a contrast. That was like a change in the tone of the film almost at that point. And then they took over, I think it was Aqaba or something like that, the port city there with the guns, and that change, that success, of course, built up his persona even more, and his arrogance, and it was just you could just tell there was just a huge change in the film at that point. Really cool stuff.
It's funny you mentioned Star Wars. I didn't realize until now, but Alec Guinness is in this film. He's also in the original Star Wars trilogy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't put that together until you said so. I thought he looked familiar.
Oh, Obi-Wan, yeah.
It was Obi-Wan, but it was his voice. I was like, God, who is that voice? And I was like, oh no, Obi-Wan is Prince Faisal. This is problematic.
Yeah, it's kind of come full circle there.
Yeah, I think Sir Alec Guinness, he's also in The Bridge Over River Kwai, I believe.
He is.
Which was, I think so, yeah. It was a pretty good film too. So
it's a brilliant film. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the major decisions that TE makes is when he decides to go after the group that killed all the innocent people, and he goes to slaughter them instead of taking his people to safety and kind of being done. So that was a big, kind of a major point in the story. But that's during his descent into his fall from grace. And there's a scene where in the background, I believe, the god who fell with with winged feet. Jeez, I can't believe I forgot. The god who fell from grace. I'm forgetting the name now.
Cannot remember.
Yeah, this is embarrassing. Okay. Give me a second. I'll find it. Is it Pegasus?
That's the whole. Oh, Icarus.
Icarus. Sorry,
Okay.
Icarus. So yeah, there's lots of symbolism, but that was one that I picked up on.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. Yeah, it was very interesting to see. Of course, they come into Damascus and they capture Damascus, and just like, and just hearing in the news very recently about something else going on in Damascus right now, but it's just amazing that all the conflict in that area is still going on since back then. It's crazy. Crazy stuff. But what an important city, you know?
Yeah.
What an important place for the region. And
Well, as they said, I mean, nothing else mattered apart from Damascus at the end of the day. That for all of the other places and the ports and all of the other things that the English and French and all were concerned about, for the Arabs, it was all about Damascus.
yeah, and of course the irony of them getting Damascus, setting up their own headquarters, trying to leave the British out of it, but not quite succeeding because of their own faults in not being able to get along. Once again, they fall right back into tribal habits, and they can't come to their own agreements, even with Lawrence there. They end up arguing over resources. They end up arguing over, duties and what have you. And in the end, Prince Faisal is going to end up making agreements with the British in order to stabilize things. And that's really got to be heartbreaking to everything that Lawrence has gone through this whole time, to end up in this place where it wasn't the goal he wanted, even though he kind of got what he wanted by having the Arab tribes take Damascus. Nothing is ever turns out as you think it's going to.
It does make you question: is it futile for was it futile for them or any other group or culture to go against an empire? I mean, is it because the empire can play the long game, and they can buy their time and wait because they have the resources and the power? So it's a little depressing.
I think what it does is it sets up kind of the future, though. When things move on or otherwise, a rebellion at that stage can kind of give hope to the people further down the line that they can break free from the empire further down the line. So, but just timing at that stage, guns were bigger, the lances weren't right, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, these even if the idealized rebellion doesn't work, or uprising, what have you, there is like you said, the ideas are still there for future generations to take hold of and improve upon, hopefully. And it seems sometimes like it may have been all for naught when another empire is just stepping in place of the one that was there. But that's and that's the main thing that people were worried about when Americans took over Iraq. And was that just another empire moving in? What are the effects of that? And the British Empire moving into Syria in the Middle East. It's the same idea. It's what are the effects? What's going to be the difference? What's going to be the progress? And yeah, it was different in the way that it wasn't the same thing as being under a sultanate of the the Ottoman regime, but progress is different for everybody, and it's something that the future generations can then hopefully improve upon further.
I guess what's the cost of safety or resources and an easier way of life? I guess easier in some ways, but what you give up is
what you give up, right? It's like, even though they're under the British kind of rule now, at the end of the movie, they still have more than what they had before. So, like you said, what do you give up in order to get a bit more security? And those are the big questions. Yeah.
What really struck me towards the end, or almost at the end, was when he's sent home, and the soldier who's driving him says, "Well, we're going home. Like, you're going home," and he doesn't really know where home. He just kind of questions home, like, "Where is my home?" His concept of his life and where he belongs and what his home has completely been flipped upside down.
Yeah, and on that car ride, he sees the group of veterans riding along, and he gets up to have a look to see if he recognizes any of them as that conversation is happening. I think it's quite poignant in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And a motorcycle also drives by, kind of passes them on the side of the road. And there's also a moment there where the car is driving on the road, and all the people with wagons or on horses or camels kind of get off on this, almost like they're in the way, like they're just an obstacle, and they're not as important as the ones in the car. Kind of, they're just less than. So lots of little details in this one, which you kind of need it for this long of a movie.
Yeah, no, there is. Imagine that there's probably a lot of little details, like you said, like that you could easily miss if you're being lulled to sleep by some of the the long scenery and stuff like that. There is probably quite a bit that you could miss if you're unable to pay attention for that long of a period of time.
It's a long one.
It certainly is, yeah.
But yeah, his death, I think, is a little, I don't know. I believe that's the way he really died, right? Is a motorcycle accident, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll look it up.
I would imagine so. I don't see any reason to make that bit up.
I know. That'd be kind of tragic in and of itself if they just made that up out of the blue. But
there will be there'll be a movie about it if it's not. Oh, here's the first Google result basically says, was it an assassination or was it an accident? So his motorcycle does veer off the road, etc. But there's a mystery black car. Ooh, there you go. All sorts of excitement.
There's also speculation that he lived his life in the closet.
Really, when he got back,
he's almost certainly homosexual. According to a memoir, one of his friends who knew that he was in the closet. So,
well, Chris, there you go. That's why there was no woman in the film.
Well, there you go. That was known.
Yeah. There's also speculation that he was killed. And he died 6 days later of his injuries after the car crash.
After the car crash?
He sideswiped one of the kids on the bikes. So.
Interesting.
Wow.
Never know.
Wow.
Yeah. Anything else on anyone's list?
Wow.
It's a long one.
What a way to go after all that adventure that he had.
Yeah. I have a couple of things about the Oscars in general
Yeah.
that I think are probably worth tracking through the years. So this represents a period of time in the Oscars where the Best Picture nominees were all films that people were watching. So actually, 1962 is a pretty banner year for it, insofar as the 5 films that were nominated for the Best Picture were in the top 6 of most watched movies that year.
Right.
And each of the 5 nominees were from a different major studio, given, again, this idea that the Oscars are very political rather than necessarily always just a representation of the best films. I think this idea develops more as it goes along, and it's very interesting to contrast those kind of things with, by the time you get to today's thing about the films that are nominated and the fact that most people don't actually watch any of them in the cinema. Last year might be the exception to that. But the other films that were nominated that year, sometimes, and this will be interesting for next year as well, the next one that we do, sometimes does the right film always win the Best Picture?
Yeah, that's always a question.
Yeah, so there were a couple of big hitters this year. To Kill a Mockingbird came out this year. And was nominated for Gregory Peck won the Best Actor over Peter O'Toole for it, which I think quite rightly. And it's actually the 6th highest grossing movie of that year. It's the one that fell outside of the top 5, but still got nominated. Mutiny in the Bounty, the remake, The Music Man, and then The Longest Day, which is another major war film that was done that year. And I think one of the interesting things about the Oscars at this stage is that they had a lot of different categories for black and white and colour. So, like cinematography, it was split into black and white and colour. And The Longest Day won it for black and white, and Lawrence of Arabia obviously won it for colour and things. So, a lot of the awards, etc., I think, even though this was 1962, you would think that in the cinema terms, black and white would have been phased out or would have been long gone, but it was still very much a very influential medium.
Yeah. Well, The Apartment was in black and white.
Yeah, that's right, so it was, yeah.
That won Best Picture. I think that beat out Ben-Hur.
Yeah, Ben-Hur was the year before. It was 59. Ben-Hur won 59, I'm pretty sure.
It was something big that it beat out.
I'll tell you now. The Apartment.
Best Picture,
Apartment beat out The Alamo, Elmer Gantry, Sons and Lovers, and the Sundowners. Ben-Hur was the year before. Ben-Hur was up against Anatomy of a Murder, which was enormous room at the top. So it beat out a number of great films. West Side Story beat out Guns and Avalon, Judgment at Nuremberg, one of those classic war pictures that are very revered along times as well.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have no problem with Lawrence of Arabia winning this year. I mean, I think To Kill a Mockingbird's brilliant book, brilliant movie, but Lawrence of Arabia really has an aura about it. You know, it's so beautiful. I can only imagine watching it in the cinema at those times, just going, "Oh my god!" This is like you'd have went back to the cinema again and again just to watch what was on the screen.
If you had the time.
if you had the time. Well, I mean, we didn't have streaming TV or anything like that, so maybe you did. You know, maybe you did have the time. Maybe you went every day of the week, possibly.
You know, I think we do appreciate entertainment less and less as we have more options. So, if it was the only show in town and there was radio or a film that is 3.5 hours long, you're probably excited to go see a 3.5 hour film because it's longer, you get more of it. So
that's right.
I think we have a different perception of it now.
Yeah. And we live in an age probably when 3 hour movies are like, oh God, not a 3 hour movie, for the love of God. It's drawn out, and there's no doubt Lawrence of Arabia is really drawn out. I mean, there's lots of periods of his life I could have done without. I don't see that a lot of it was added to, but it does give you an idea of the breadth and journey of his character, as much as anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Is it? I know it's considered a masterpiece. I know that a lot of people love this movie, and it's considered one of the best films of all time.
Yeah.
But did it need to be this long?
Depends on who you ask. I mean, some people would say yes.
Answer definitely not,
A
though.
lot of people these days probably would say no.
Yeah, I just think there's lots of long, drawn out shots and lots of. So I get what they were trying to do, but they really hammer it home.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very much a reaction to winning the Oscar, because if you look at the previous years, Ben-Hur won in '59, like I was saying, it was a massive epic. It was very long as well. It was very lauded at the time. William Wyler film, absolutely incredible. And then you had things like The Alamo, Guns and Avron, Judgment, Nuremberg was also 3.5 hours long, but it's also set in a courtroom for a lot of it. They didn't quite hit the mark. I would say rightly, because I think West Side Story is incredible. I think The Apartment's incredible as well. I think the best films definitely won those years, but they were probably leaving nothing to chance with Lawrence of Arabia, and went, well, let's have the longest, most beautiful film that we can possibly have, and there's no way it can lose.
Yeah. Well, you also get that, I have a great cinematographer and I have this unbelievable scenery. I'm going to make the most use of it as I can, the lure of that must have been incredible for the filmmakers to not include it all as much as they could, because it really is stunning footage, whether it should have been relegated to a National Geographic special is another question. But
to be fair, the 5 films that were nominated, obviously, Lawrence of Arabia is 3 hours 47. The Longest Day is 3 hours. The Music Man was only 2.5. Mutant and the Bounty was 3 hours long.
Wow,
and To Kill a Mockingbird was 2 hours 10. So I mean, it was a lot. Those 5 films that made the shortlist were all. You wouldn't want to go see all of those in one day, back to back to back.
Not enough time in the day to see all those back to back.
No, definitely not. No pee breaks there.
No. So where does this rank for both of you on the ones we've watched so far? So The Apartment, West Side Story, and this one, right? Or am I missing one?
Yep.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right.
Three, yeah.
It's my heart says third, which sounds ridiculous. Because I think Lawrence of Arabia is very, very, very good. As I said before, West Side Story is one of my all-time favorite films, and I think The Apartment is kind of unique in a lot of ways in terms of being an Oscar-winning kind of comic Billy Wilder film. Yeah.
Jeez, I'm gonna put this one second.
Oh,
yeah.
What's third?
Third for me was West Side Story.
West Side Story. Yeah.
I love The Apartment.
I love The Apartment.
I don't know what happened there, but it just really caught me. Like, wow, it's
perfect.
good.
That's
really good. Yeah, I think this is 3 on my list. I think The Apartment, West Side Story, and this one so far.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be hard to dethrone The Apartment. I mean, we have a lot of movies to go, but we'll see. We'll see. The Apartment's really good, though. I love that movie.
I really loved it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a brilliant movie. Brilliant movie. And like, Lawrence of Arabia is the most cinematic of all of the 3 of those movies by a long shot. If you were going to the cinema, as a lot of people do for spectacle, it's very hard to top in that category.
Sure.
So next up we have Tom Jones.
Tom Jones.
A British film. Oh my God, not a British
I know
film.
nothing about that.
It's a British period comedy film based on Henry Fielding's novel, The History of Tom Jones.
Mm-hmm.
It stars Albert Finney as a titular character, a young man who faces various adventures and romances in 18th century England. We'll see.
Yeah. English period thing. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's 2 hours and 9 minutes, so it's like half the time.
God, I might watch it 7 times.
So, yeah. So we'll see. Tom Jones.
Awesome.
Yeah. So until next time, Jared, where can people find you?
You can find me at the Fantasy Thinker YouTube channel, and you can find me on Page Chewing Forums with on podcasts like Speculative Speculations and Film Chewing and Friday Conversations and,
Ton of them. Yeah.
and read-alongs and keep going. Yeah,
Never ends.
it's great.
And Chris, where can people find you?
So people can find me in a lot of the same places that Jared mentioned there, but you can also find me in my film channel, which is just my name, Chris Mullen, or book channel, which is The Chronicle of Chris, which is sadly lacking in content. In fact, some might argue both of them are. Yeah.
Yeah. Hard to keep up. Yeah, you can find us on patreon.com if you'd like to join us. You just join the forum and let us know you want to join. We have many movies to go. So,
Yeah.
thanks for listening, and until next time, we'll talk to everyone very soon.